Good evening and welcome to the Late Debate, where tonight we'll be talking all things Brexit. But first, we're going to meet the MP from Surrey who attempts to keep tabs on Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. He's a former special advisor at the Foreign Office, a former army captain whose parliamentary CV includes one notable, if not extraordinary, admission to fellow MPs.
I use poppers. I'm out myself as a popper user and would be directly affected by this legislation.
This was Crispin Blunt attacking government plans to ban party drugs like poppers. Mr Blunt first came to wider public attention in 2003 when he led the Tory revolt against party leader Ian Duncan Smith.
Ian Duncan Smith is not the best person to lead the Conservative Party into the country.
Well, I'm afraid the Conservative Party has to face up to the fact that our leader is not proving a credible alternative Prime Minister to the electorate.
Over the following months, Mr Blunt's role as ringleader in the attempted coup was reinforced as he made the case for a change at the top, ultimately helping to secure a confidence vote in Mr Duncan Smith's leadership.
The Parliamentary Party has spoken, the announcement has been made, and I will stand down as leader.
As chair of the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr Blunt had another Conservative leader in his sights over Britain's role in the overthrow of Libya's Colonel Gaddafi. This time, Mr Blunt's fire was aimed at Prime Minister David Cameron.
Decisions were being made on the basis of inadequate information, and the outcome of that was a stabilisation plan for Libya that didn't work, and a Libya that is now in chaos.
Mr Crispin Blunt.
More recently, he's shared concern about Donald Trump's Muslim travel ban.
This executive order will be a self-inflicted wound in the fight against terrorism.
He's also criticised the Speaker's public disdain for President Trump's planned state visit. So, plenty to talk about. My guest tonight was elected chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee after the general election. So he started off scrutinising Philip Hammond, and now he's got Boris Johnson to keep an eye on. Welcome, Crispin Blunt. First of all, did John Bercow overstep the mark?
Yes, he did, and the Speaker's meant to stay above the political fray, shouldn't really know what the Speaker's opinions are, and the Speaker's job is obviously to protect all shades of opinion within the House. And on this occasion, he stepped over the line, and I think he's sort of made that clear, the apology to Norman Fowler.
So how much damage has it done to him?
Well, it's done a bit of damage to him, I think. Let's hope he retrieves the ground and continues to, in that sense. He made clear yesterday that with a sort of admission that it might be a good idea to move on, as though this is not territory he was comfortable on.
But it's not just John Bercow who's got himself into a bit of a pickle over the Trump visit, so has the Prime Minister. What's her way out? Delay? Cancellation?
Well, I think the best way out for everybody is for the American administration to actually look at the suitable date for the visit. And 2020 looks like a pretty good date for a state visit by an American president of the United Kingdom. It's the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrim Fathers. That's all the Thanksgiving celebrations in America. So it's a huge anniversary in the United States. And obviously it's a very important mark of the British-American relationship.
It's going to take an awful lot of diplomacy, isn't it, to persuade the new White House that perhaps we need to uninvite them temporarily.
Well, no, I think I mean, they then have a head of government visit at some point this year. That would make perfect sense. And then you then have an opportunity then to have a full state visit with all the pomp and circumstance that then marks a very profound date in the American-British relationship.
Do you think President Trump poses a threat to the existing world order?
We'll again have to see how the administration develops and what the relationship is going to be between the White House and the State Department and the Pentagon, and obviously he's appointed two very strong leaders to the State Department and the Pentagon, and he's already conceded his personal position on torture to General Mattis's professional opinion. We've already seen a continuation of the American position towards Russia. How much of that came out?
What about his reaction to China and the islands in the South China Sea? His views on Israel, are those worrying you?
Yeah, well, of course they're concerning, and we're going to have to see how the administration as a whole plays out as it beds down. And what's very important about the Theresa May relationship with Donald Trump is that she then becomes another voice for the administration as a whole, probably sharing a line, the British Prime Minister putting in a line that would reflect that coming out of the Pentagon or coming out of the State Department, that then is another voice into the debate inside the American administration.
Do you think, on reflection, she was too hasty in her embrace of the new White House?
No, I think it's absolutely necessary. And you've got to remember that first...
Perhaps not holding hands.
Well, he held her hand, I think, but it's this, whatever the name of that phobia is of going down steps or whatever it was. So I don't think we'll make too much of that. The really important thing in that visit was when, in that press conference, when she turned to him and made clear what had been agreed on NATO and made him agree to it. And of course, he'd sent out all sorts of signals about NATO previously that caused great doubt and concern. But if she came back with an assurance that this was not a matter for debate in the administration, full commitment to NATO and the Article 5 guarantee, and she came back with a Russian policy out of the administration that is consistent with what's gone before, pretty signal achievements.
You say it's early days to judge the relationship between the White House and the State Department. Is there anything that rings alarm bells at this stage?
Well, I think everyone is waiting to see how this beds down, and of course, all well, I say all, a lot of the tweets that come out give anxiety. The executive order obviously was, frankly, daft because it's impractical and it sends out a message about the United States that is that in values terms has been seen as horrible around the world. So it was not a clever thing to do, and in my judgment, the mark of an immature administration that hadn't had the chance to do proper joined-up policy making and have, I think, if you'd given that about 15 minutes of detailed analysis in any of the responsible departments, they'll have said, actually, this is not a terribly good idea.
Your day job is to keep tabs on Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary.
Yeah.
What's your verdict on how he's doing so far?
I think Boris is a very shrewd appointment because he's a great wordsmith. We have a celebrity Foreign Secretary, and what Britain's got to do now as we leave the European Union is articulate for itself a new role in the world, and Boris has given that a name. It's Global Britain, and of course it rides on all the history that the United Kingdom has and all the amazing links we have as a country right around the world. And he, I think, is probably the most effective spokesman for that view to paint that picture to the rest of the world. So I'm in that sense. So I think it was a good appointment. And then you've got the other appointments that flank him. The David Davis appointment to conduct the Brexit negotiations, probably the politician most equipped in the House of Commons to conduct the detailed negotiations that have got to go on for Brexit.
Boris is a very different character to his predecessor, Philip Hammond, obviously a fellow Surrey Tory MP to you. Compare and contrast the two.
Well, I'd like to put it in cricket terms. If the Select Committee is bowling at batsmen, if you were bowling at Philip Hammond, taking questions, you're bowling at boycott. Very careful, very disciplined. Doesn't score a huge amount of runs, but you don't get him out. With Boris, it's much more fun.
Not quite so disciplined.
Not quite so. And Boris is much more prepared to, let's say, think on the hoof and engage with ideas, and almost publicly. And of course, that gets him into trouble. But of course, he can extricate himself from that. But we've got to, in that sense, you can see a complete contrast in styles. And I think that Theresa May relationship with both Boris and with Philip Hammond actually makes a pretty effective triumvirate at the top of government.
Do we like the idea of a celebrity foreign secretary? He is, after all, diplomat in chief.
Well, I think we need to present the United Kingdom. We need interest in the United Kingdom. When we have a foreign secretary who attracts interest, you've now got, whatever the criticisms of things he said in the past, you've now got fellow foreign ministers queuing up to have their photograph taken with him. And so he's a figure of interest. Britain is of interest as we redefine our role in the world post-Brexit. I think that's
Before we let you go, I've got to ask you one question. We saw your part in the downfall of Ian Duncan Smith. Have you kissed a maid up?
Yeah. I mean, I sat on when he was the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, and I was a junior Justice Minister. I sat on his cabinet committee that dealt with social justice, and we were in exactly the same place about issues such as rehabilitation of offenders and delivering of social justice in that area to try and improve the effectiveness of our actual criminal justice system.
we've got to stop there. We're running out of time. Could have talked to you all evening, but thank you very much indeed for coming in this evening. Now, the government got its bill to get us out of the EU through the House of Commons unscathed last night. The same can't be said of the Labour Party. There were deep divisions on display. More than 20 London Labour MPs defied a three-line whip and voted against the bill as it cleared its final Commons hurdle.
The ayes to the right, 494. The noes to the left, 122.
The numbers told their own story. A comfortable victory for Theresa May in this key parliamentary test over Brexit. For Jeremy Corbyn, the maths were less palatable. Almost half of his fellow London Labour MPs defied him and voted against triggering Article 50. For 3 days, MPs had argued, questioned and intervened.
Is she aware, as I am, of EU nationals in very senior positions in the UK, in UK institutions, who are already leaving the country?
Any delay to the timetable would inject an additional dose of uncertainty into the entire process. Bad for business, frustrating for the public, and that would harm our negotiating position rather than reinforce it.
I've had in my surgery constituents coming in tears and fretting what will happen to them next and their job. And we should not, it's not a British value, does my honourable friend agree with me, that we use people as bargaining chips.
Dawn Butler resigned her shadow cabinet post to defy Mr Corbyn. Some of her co-rebels from London are once again questioning his leadership.
Labour will need to raise its game. Labour will need to become a government in waiting over the coming months and years, and Labour will need a much stronger, coherent story about the kind of country we want to be.
The Labour leader appeared a little tetchy today.
Can you stop recording that?
Yeah.
Can you stop recording?
Yeah.
I am not standing down. I'm carrying on, and we as a party are campaigning on the National Health Service, on social care and on housing.
Division! Clear the lobbies!
It used to be an unbroken rule of politics. It's the Tory party which can't get its act together over Europe. Now it's Labour in turmoil. To discuss the fallout, I'm joined by Labour MP Catherine West, who was one of the 22 London Labour rebels, for the Conservatives Bob Stewart, and for the Liberal Democrats former London MEP Baroness Sarah Ludford, who sits in the Lords. Welcome all of you. Catherine, first of all, loyalty to constituents or your party leader, how hard was that?
Well, it was a matter of my conscience and my heart. I think last night was probably one of the saddest nights in politics for me.
Sad?
Because I've always been a really strong believer in the European Union, and there was something final about the third reading on that bill. So I actually went home feeling angry and sad, mixed emotions, but certainly I've got a clear conscience because I don't believe it's in the national interest.
You didn't feel like doing the honourable thing like your London colleagues Tulip Siddiq and Dawn Butler and resigning from the front bench?
Well, I think each of us has to make our own decision. I have actually been to see the whips today to discuss the situation, the vote late last night. And
what are they going to do to punish you?
I'm sure they'll be in touch with me over the break because of the House rises today. But I think the important thing is that you can sleep well at night. And the important thing is that each Member of Parliament has to make up his or her own mind on such a crucial issue as leaving the European Union.
Bob, why did the government waste so many millions of pounds trying to challenge in the courts the whole Brexit debate?
Don't ask me, really.
Well, if you can't answer...
I mean, the answer is, the fact of the matter is we lost that in the government. I would have said, bring it to the House of Commons and let the House of Commons decide on triggering of Article 50. I was not part of the decision process. I voted with the government loyally, I have to say. But the fact of the matter is, this is a really difficult matter for the country. It's almost split the country in half. Some people are just over sometimes. Someone like myself, to be honest, you know, what decided me to vote to leave was the sovereignty thing. Others have different views. It wasn't money, it was the sovereignty thing.
Sarah, so can we ask, will your attempts to block exiting the EU be limited to watering it down, or will sabotage be slightly more severe?
Well, certainly my Lib Dem colleagues in the Lords will act within the constitutional limits of the Lords, but we will do our constitutional duty, which is to scrutinise and to seek to amend where we feel that would be the right thing. But I'd just say, and Catherine talked about the final say in the Commons. Maybe it was, well, it may not be in the Commons, depending what happens in the Lords. But the final say should, of course, be with the voters, just as they had their say last year. They should have a say on whether they think any Brexit deal negotiated is good enough compared
Catherine,
to what we
you
have
backed the Lib
in the
Dems
EU
amendment yesterday for a second referendum. You presumably, Bob, are horrified by the thought of a second referendum.
Horrified by the thought of a second. We can't have it. The decision was made last June, and we went to the country on that matter, as we promised in our manifesto.
It wasn't a decision, and actually,
It was a
very
decision.
interestingly, David Davis 4 years ago said that, precisely what we are saying. Really, he used the term a mandate referendum for what happened last June. In the event happened last June, and a decision referendum after the negotiations have happened, which is essentially what we are asking. So what was good enough for the Brexit Secretary 4 years ago should be good enough for the government now. And it makes absolute sense because there's a sort of relay between Parliament and the people. Parliament set the conditions for the referendum in the Referendum Act. People voted and they said by a majority, small majority, they wanted to leave. Parliament then discusses the parameters of that and then puts back to the people the results of what has then happened.
Do you accept that Brexit is unstoppable?
It depends what the people want. That is
decided.
democracy. No, the will of the people should be expressed in whether the people will the final result that comes out from any negotiations that the government conducts.
Is it your secret wish that
it's
reversed?
It's a safety valve because the thing is none of us knows exactly what Brexit is going to mean in the next 2 years. If the economy takes a huge dive, if people are desperately unhappy, then I think we need to have the right as a safety valve to have another decision. But I think the important thing is that we all now get behind some kind of negotiation, that we're positive, and I think what you're saying is they've decided, but I think and you said it was about sovereignty, not money, but I think that's all very well. If you live in a very poor part of the country, it's all very well for the likes of Mr Farage to say it's not about money, but he's not going to be poor. There are lots of people who will be affected financially by this.
Everyone has had a view on this, and it's very difficult, and nothing is forever, but let's just see how it goes. And I believe very strongly that we'll get it right.
Bob, can you say hand on heart that London's economy and Londoners won't be harmed by us leaving the EU?
I can put my hand on my heart and say I don't know. I damn well hope not, because this is actually the motor of our economy.
Slightly horrified by don't
know.
I
don't see how you could say yes or no.
Heart. I'm sure he has a wonderful heart, but a wing and a prayer and a heart aren't good enough. So far we haven't seen massive effects on the economy, but all the predictions are looking serious, and we're going to have inflation coming through, and the potential disruption, particularly if Theresa May, who says no deal is better than a bad deal, threatening to crash and burn into out of the EU, will be extremely serious. And actually, I'm pleased that Sadiq Khan, as Mayor of London, is representing the majority view of Londoners and trying to do the best.
Sarah,
but of course, he's hemmed in by.
We learned this week the Mayor is going on a grand tour of 5 European capitals to shout that London is open. Yeah. Is that really value for money for Londoners?
I think it is. I mean, the important thing is I know that people in my constituency will lose their jobs, both people who work in the city or in the supply chain which provides jobs into the city, or even in universities, in science and technology, in medical research. There are a number of areas which are at risk as a result of Brexit. So there are lots of, and also there's lots of uncertainty, and we know that business doesn't like uncertainty, and there are a lot of foreign direct investment decisions being made in boardrooms around the globe which won't happen because of Brexit.
I don't know how you could say that, because I mean, one of the things I would like to think that the grants that come from the European Union, which incidentally we pay to the European Union, will stay the same. I would anticipate.
What?
Yeah. Well,
but anyway, it's not so much about grants because London doesn't get so much money, but it's about the investment, and we know that particularly financial services firms are already moving in order to get a licence in the rest of the EU to continue to trade. They're moving at least some of their staff. We know that EU nationals are being dissuaded because they don't know what the prospects are going to be from coming here to work, and that's hitting not only NHS and social care, but other sectors of the economy, particularly creative industries, for instance. So, you know, there are loads of ways in which Brexit is going to harm London's economy and the rest of the country.
Hasn't harmed yet. Things haven't really changed yet, and we thought it was going to be a disaster as soon as it happened. It hasn't happened. That's factual.
It could be ameliorated if we stay in the single
it
market
could be,
instead of this
but I'm
extreme
just saying it
hard
hasn't
Brexit.
so far.
Catherine, could I just turn to another subject briefly? Trump.
Yes.
If he comes and addresses Parliament, would you boycott it?
If that ban is lifted, I would feel much more comfortable about a visit from Mr Trump. So provided he lifts the ban, which I believe to be discriminatory, then I would be much more relaxed about his visit.
Where do you stand on the Trump visit?
Firstly, I don't think the ban will last because actually it's against the law, American law. There are checks and balances, and I think it will be changed. And with regard to the President of the United States making a state visit, I differentiate between the President and the man, Donald Trump. Donald Trump is one person. The President of the United States is another matter. If the President of the United States is making a state visit, it comes as the President, not as Donald Trump.
Do you think he should address Parliament?
I don't believe he should, and I certainly wouldn't be there. But I think, most importantly, I think the government is potentially embarrassing the Queen. The government should take notice of the almost 2 million, I think it is now, people who've signed a petition to not have a Trump state visit. I think it is a very bad idea that Theresa May is holding hands with Trump. In this rather the same, I'm afraid, that Tony Blair,
they never held hands
to Mr Bush. Those things
everything's twisted.
And unfortunately, very unfortunately, and she should have acted more like Chancellor Merkel.
The reality is that we do have to have a relationship with the states.
Relationship, but
I think the important thing is that we don't compromise on our own values.
In the little time we've got left,
nobody likes you if you genuinely bow and kowtow to people.
Let me just ask you about the Surrey County Council story. As a former council leader, Islington, how envious would you be of a sweetheart deal to bankroll your social care?
Fantastic, just text and give me a credit line.
Bob, are we really expected to believe this story from the government that those texts were all about some pilot scheme in the future for devolution and nothing to do with a sweetheart deal?
Don't ask me. I'm not part of the government. I'm on the government benches. I don't know whether there's a sweetheart deal. I don't know nothing. I do know that each council is allowed to charge 3% more for social care. That's what I know.
Sarah, you're another ex-councillor.
Yep. Yeah, well, there certainly shouldn't be a secret deal. It should be published, just like Nissan and the cars. We need to have full transparency. But it just shows the problems of health and social care. There needs to be not only more money, but a cross-party approach. Norman Lamb, my colleague in the Commons, is calling for a cross-party convention so we get long-term planning to integrate care and to fund it properly.
But sadly, when the Lib Dems were in government, they did take $5 billion out of the NHS. So, you know, from 2010 onwards, it's been
There we have to leave it, I'm afraid. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Thank you to all my guests tonight, to Crispin, Catherine, Bob and Sarah. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back with the Late Debate next month when we'll be working out exactly what the budget means for London. Till then, good night. Thank you very much.